Thank you very much. Just to be clear, now the bar for food is really, really high. Before I start, I'll mention a lot of book references, links, and things like that. And you don't have to go around and scribble very fast. I'll provide a link at the end so you can get everything. So as Domogai told me many times in this email, because we're labbing, just relax. So what I want to talk about today is the fact that in 20 years, you'll likely have a very different job from now. The problem is, you don't know what kind of job it's going to be. Nobody knows. The rate of technological change has been accelerating. It took us thousands of years to master agriculture, writing, and wheel. It took us only centuries for a printing press, a steam engine, and electricity. And it took us only decades for nuclear energy, internet, and the computer. A progress this fast is really good for humanity, but it's anxiety-inducing for one human being. The times when you would learn a trade and practice it until the end of your life are long gone. Today it feels like there's a new development, new groundbreaking development every couple of weeks, maybe months. And not a lot of people have time, money, or energy to reinvent themselves every time. So the question for today is, if we need to prepare for the jobs of the future that we don't know, what skills today should we acquire, and what skills should we just avoid? My journey to answer this question started about 20 years ago, and it started here. Who knows? What is this? Fallout. Fallout is and by the way, can we get this screen working? This one is not working, thank you. Fallout is a role-playing game that launched around 20 years ago. And in this game, you choose your character, you choose some attributes, skills. And I really enjoyed playing this game as a kid. And I remember one afternoon, even though I knew this all along, I started playing the game and it just hit me. If I start a new game, I will lose all the progress. If I start another game, not Fallout, all the skills that I learned here, all the experiences and equipment and everything I did, just goes to waste. There is no way to transfer skills from either starting a new game or playing a completely different game. And I was very young, I wasn't able to verbalize it really, but I made two decisions. The first one is I will play less games. Not stop it because I liked it, I just play less games. And I'll try to play more games of life. And I want to find those skills that when you practice and you acquire them, you can transfer them from game to game, from area to area. However, it took me a lot of learning, reading, talking to people, and changing jobs, that only after 10 years I started to see some of the patterns. So when I got my first job, which was software development, this bar up there shows all the skills I needed to perform my job. After a couple of years, I decided to switch my jobs and to start a new one. It was still the same domain, just a slightly different position. So what happened is that all the skills I had, when I started a new job, most of it I could transfer. So the job was pretty similar. And then the rest I had to learn. Those are the skills that were very job-specific. Then, after many years, I decided to switch to make a bigger change in my career. And I went from software development to UX design. I started my first job in UX design, and this is what happened. Only a subset of skills I was able to transfer. And I wasn't starting from scratch, but it felt like this. I had to invest a lot of time to learn and improve, to actually be able to do my job. And then my next job, when I went to Google, it was the same domain, and it happened in a similar way, right? I could transfer most of my skills, not everything. And I had to learn the rest. So there is something interesting here. You can see a pattern. It seems like there is something on the right-hand side that is very specific to the job or the position where I was. Then there's this middle part that is dependent on the domain, either software development, UX design, medicine, agriculture, right? Specific to the domain. But it seems there is also on the left this part that is very, very broad. You can apply it wherever you work. So what I call them on the left-hand side is the foundational skills. And then we have domain-specific skills, which include something that's transferable inside domain and also something that's very specific to your job. So we'll talk first about domain skills. And domain skills, there are a lot of them. So we can be here for probably 4 months and talk about all domain skills we won't be able to scratch the surface. So what we'll do instead, we'll try to use an example to build a model that hopefully you can use to find what is really important in your domain. And for the example, I've used just one set of skills in software development. It's not exhaustive in any way, and it doesn't cover all the skills you need in software development. But I think it's going to be a good one. Imagine you're just starting software development. You've never done anything like this before. And the company you want to apply for, they use Django. And Django is a web framework for written in Python. And to learn this, to get a job there, you also have to learn Python. And you explore, go on the web, and you see, but if I know Python, it means I can also use it for other things. For example, there is a web development framework called Flask. Or now in machine learning, there are a lot of frameworks that you can use in Python. So that's interesting. To know Python, you need to know the syntax, right? You need to know all the words that you can write so that the computer can interpret it. But while you're learning programming, right, Django and Python, what you're actually learning are traditional programming language constructs. Things like conditionals, variables, loops, functions, classes. These are things that are really important that you use to build your program. But then if you look around and try to find a different programming language like Java, you realize, it's pretty much the same, right? The syntax is slightly different, but I already know all those things. And as you learn programming, you're actually learning algorithmic thinking. What is that? It means being able to state a problem and define a number of steps how to solve the problem. And you can use it for any kind of problem to solve. How do you break it down? How do you break a big chunk into small steps that can be resolved? And when you know this, you can actually program, you can code something, it can be run on Django. But then if you know general problem-solving skills, algorithmic thinking, you can use the same skills for something that is slightly different, but also similar, right? For example, robotics. And I don't know if some of you played with the Lego Mindstorms, but they have this framework for where you can define which steps to do to accomplish what a robot needs to accomplish, to find a goal. It's not traditional programming as we know it, but it uses the same set of skills. How do you break down a problem, and how do you inform the robot to do something? So now you know something. Like you can write a program, it can run, you can solve smaller problems. That's pretty good. What's next? Well, now you come into more harder skills, technical system design. And this is how you define your interfaces, your classes, your modules. How do different programs communicate? Maybe it's on a bigger scale, how multiple applications work together, how it works on a platform level. And this is very closely tied to just thinking in systems, like system theory. What are the inputs, what are the outputs, what are the feedback loops, how things communicate. But when you look at this, then this is very broad, and you can apply this to many different things. Imagine you're building an automated warehouse or a fulfillment center. You can use the same skills also there. So when we look at this example, you can see that from the top left, it sort of branches out. You have each of the higher level skills supports many more of those smaller skills on the left. And you can call them like leaf skills, those on the right. And what's interesting is that to do your job, you need to do everything. You need to know all the skills It's not that one skill is more important than the other. However, when you talk to very experienced people, in this case, for example, software engineering, you ask them, what makes you really good at your job? And it usually comes down around to maintaining complexity. How not to allow that the complexity takes over. And to be really good at this, to be able to solve this, what is more important is technical system design. It's more important than knowing the language. So skills that are more on the left seem more, they give you more mastery. You'll be perceived as a master. If you know a syntax language for 14 languages and just can write scripts, you will never be considered a really good programmer. You need a lot of skills also on the left. So how to find those skills? So there are a couple of things you can do. You can talk to very experienced people in the field. If you're starting in a new field, just find maybe informal mentors, have a coffee with them, and try to understand what they're really struggling with. What was hard 20 years ago, what is hard now? Because if something is easy, it seems like it's something that has been already solved, and you don't need to focus on that. But what are those skills that really persist over time? The other one is that you can talk to people who are working in adjacent fields, and see where this branch, where it connects. In this way, you can find something that is more transferable between different domains. And the last one that I really like is you can read all publications and books. And what you want to find are those problems that are still persisting today. One good example is a Mythical Man Month. There's a bunch of articles written in the 70s and 80s. And those are experiences for software that was written in the 50s and 60s. And they had a couple of problems there. One of them, can we write the program that is small enough to fit into memory, into the storage? So storage was a really big problem. Storage is not a problem anymore today, right? Not a lot of us have storage problems. But then there was other thing is, how can we write software that is testable, that is maintainable? That was a challenge 40, 50 years ago, and it's a challenge still today. So it seems like this is one of the skills that is worth investing in, that you can use for a very long time. Going back to the division of foundational and domain skills. I'll go into the foundational skills now, and I'll open them up immediately. So they are communication, creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. And I don't think you are surprised by this, right? You've been hearing about them for quite a while. But what I want to do, I want to go deeper into each one. Because there's this misconception that, oh, communication is just easy, we do it, right? Critical thinking, well, we probably do it. I want to go deeper and explain each of them and what are the sub-skills in there that you can really focus on. What I'm not going to cover are two other things, learning and health and well-being. You'll need to learn more and more stuff over time. So this is sort of a meta skill. And you can improve how you learn. And the other thing I will not cover, but is really very important, is you as a person. Your health, your sleep hygiene, your mental health, those things really affect how fast you learn, how well you perform at work. And those things are more and more important. So you just cannot come to work and be a bricklayer and just put stuff and carry stuff on the left and the right. You as a knowledge worker will have to come to work really focused, really concentrated, and really eager to learn. So those things are really important. I will focus on the left on the 4. Let's start with communication. And communication, we are humans, right? Social creatures. Gossiping comes easy to us. So we can say we are good at communication. But I wouldn't agree. It's really hard to communicate well. And let's go into 5 things that are really hard. And the first one is, it's so important that even in the post-apocalyptic world, it's there. The first one is being able to clearly articulate ideas. And I'm pretty sure you had experiences at work where someone would go around and around and around, and could never stop, could never be able to say what they really want. And you can practice this. How can you make something really short and really understandable? It's really, really important. But it's sometimes hard to really get to this. And there is this other tool that can help you, and it's writing. And I have to say, I'm really sad that nobody in my 16 years of education taught me how to write well. People taught me to write things on paper, words, sentences, but they didn't really teach me how to write well, how to express myself, how to make something short, how to make something dynamic. And today, when we write emails, articles, technical documentation, proposals, documentation, requirements, all of those things, writing is really important, especially as we get to more and more distributed work. And writing is hard. For you who have tried either to publish something or to write something internally just for yourself, writing is hard. But writing is good because it externalizes your thoughts. And you can look at your thoughts and you can edit them. And it can help you with the point number 1. 2 books to help you, right? Keys to good writing is how you make a good composition, how to write well. There's also Sense of Style, which is specifically tailored to English language, how to write well in English, but I will also highly recommend it. The next one is public speaking. And I'm not just saying people speaking at a conference like this. Any kind of speaking in front of a group. This is really important. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying for everyone, but you should be able to do it. And you can go through it with practice. Either at a meeting, you can run a workshop, maybe just go to the meetup and explain something there. But being able to stand in front of and have a posture and command your voice and being able to talk to a group, I think it's really important. And then one, maybe not surprise, but maybe it will be for some, a key to good communication skills is listening. Active listening. And it's interesting because you will be perceived as a really good communicator if you don't talk too much, if you just listen. But it will actually make you a better communicator because you will listen to other person. You will listen to what they're saying. So just go into the conversation, be silent, ask a lot of questions. And the last one is having those difficult conversations. And you know what kind of conversation that is when something happens and you feel you should say something and you have this weird feeling in your stomach, maybe, I don't know, maybe someone else will do it or maybe it will go away. But you know it's not going to happen. And it's around performance reviews, giving or receiving really tough feedback. Those things are really hard, and those things are really important. And this one is really, really good, Radical Candor. Highly recommend it. The next one is creativity. And creativity is so elusive. We all want to be creative. What is creativity? So creativity is the ability to come up with new ideas, to innovate. Let's keep it at that. And there are 2 aspects to creativity, which are not exclusive. They can happen at the same time. The first one is evolutionary creativity. And it usually happens when you take an idea from other fields and you put it into your own field. And there is a good example in the bullet train of Japan. It had a problem where it would ride so fast through a tunnel, it would create a sonic boom when the train exits the tunnel. And they just couldn't solve it. And one of the engineers, he was a bird watcher. And he realized that the kingfisher, the bird on the top, would actually dive into the water and catch a fish. And it would make a minimal splash because its beak had a peculiar aerodynamics. So they tested the beak, the shape of it, and they tried to build the same model and put it on a train, and actually made the train more efficient and more silent. So this is where you can call it like a quantum jump. You come from one idea to another from a very different field. The next one is evolutionary creativity. And browsers are a really good example of that. With each launch of a new iteration of browser, there are not that many changes that are really groundbreaking. But they keep piling on and piling on and piling on. And if you take Firefox 20 and Firefox 60, it's a big difference. It's really important, like, to make all those changes, even though one step wasn't really noticeable. So those two kinds of creativity are really important. But there is a problem with creativity. Creativity is for young people, right? All the founders are really young. All the people in the media, in music, in movies, everyone who is creative is very young. Even Einstein said that if you as a scientist don't do anything by the age of 30, you can just give up. Which is not good, right? The time goes only in one direction. So what should we do? There was an interesting study in 2016 where they looked at the last 200 years and got all the works from scientists. And they tried to see what is the best time to publish a paper. And it turns out, when you publish a paper at any time, it has the same chances of success. So you can publish it at the beginning of your career or at the end of the career, and it can still be a Nobel winner. How is that? Does it make sense? Was Einstein wrong? Well, actually, no. They were both right. Einstein observed that a lot of young people publish a lot of papers, and they get all the credit. So it seems that as people, and also what confirmed in the study, is that as people get older, they publish less papers. They don't try as much. So why is that? Do we just get set in our ways? We don't want to risk anymore? Maybe. There was a bunch of studies done in the 90s, late 90s, and what they try to do is they try to take very young people and very old people in the 70s and their 80s, and they try to see how they react to new experiences. And what is shown is that if your perception of time is unbounded, if you think that you have a lot of time in front of you, you will prioritize knowledge-related goals. You will pursue knowledge. But if you think that your time is limited, you will try to focus on more emotional goals. Which makes sense, right? You think about how much time you have in front of you, it's not a lot of time. Maybe you want to spend more time with your family, with your kids, right? Who has time to meet new people, get new experiences? It takes time. But what was interesting, they could reverse the effects. Young people could also get really closed down by this, while older people can get opened up. So how do you improve in creativity? There isn't one skill that you can practice to be really creative. What you need to do is you need to change your environment. You need to change your habits. So to improve in conceptual creativity, you have to be exposed to many new ideas, many new experiences, new people. Everything that seems slightly terrifying and new and unknown, you should try to learn it. If you're very much into technical subjects and sciences, go more into humanities. Go to a museum, travel around. Also do the other way around. As Linus Pauling said, to have a good idea, you have to have a lot of ideas. To improve in evolutionary creativity, what you have to do, you have to become a master in the field. It's really hard to push the edge of knowledge if you don't know what you're doing. So going back to the domain skills, what are the skills in your domain that will bring you to mastery? And when you get to mastery, only then you can start pushing the boundary. And you can start to evolve a lot of ideas in there. I would highly recommend Peak. And this is the scientist that did a lot of studies that Malcolm Gladwell uses for his references in Outliers. So you probably heard about 10,000 hour rule. It's sort of true, but there is a lot of nuance to it. And this guy is the source, and he wrote the book about it. So if you want to get to mastery, you should read this book. As a summary is, you need to work with others, get a lot of mentors, copy others. You have to learn until you can forget it, until you don't have to think about it anymore. And only then you can create and innovate. The next one is collaboration. And just to define what it is, let's start first with cooperation. It sounds very similar. It is when people try to help each other on their own goals, to help each other's goals. While collaboration is when people start to work on their shared goal. And it can happen by chance that their shared goal is just randomly shared between people. But in a work environment or in any kind of enterprise, it's more likely that there is some leadership involved. And leadership is such a lofty thing. Like, how do we really define leadership? Many of us have this father figure somewhere that will order us around, but it is not leadership. I found a really good definition. Leadership is basically when you're responsible for an outcome, and you will do whatever is necessary that this outcome happens. And especially today, in knowledge working organizations, it doesn't mean you will just direct people what they need to do. You need to know when you need to lead, when you need to bring people along. You also need to know when you need to follow. Maybe someone else is the expert, and you need to step back and provide this other person the opportunity for them to lead. Because you shouldn't care about your image, you should care about the outcome. And if you care about the outcome, then you're a leader. The next one, really important, is influence. And influence is not manipulation. First of all, I know that when I talk to a lot of people in the tech industry, when I say influence, it's like, oh, those people fake, they lie. It's like, no. Influence is affecting someone's behavior, but being really upfront with your intentions. While manipulation is affecting someone's behavior, but hiding your intentions and using someone else as means to your ends. And this is really different. If I want you to do something, and I say, this is what I want you to do, and this is what you and I can accomplish together, and I can give you this in return, and we both do it, and we're both better off, then it's a win-win situation. It's influenced. You change someone's mind. You both did something you wanted. While manipulation is just using someone, and this is, of course, not good. I said that we are working in very fluid organizations where maybe you don't have authority over someone, and it's really hard to influence. But there are ways to do this. And I can highly recommend Cohen-Bradford model of influencing without authority, and I'll provide the link afterwards. It shows of different ways you can work with people, and you can align them towards the same goal to accomplish something. But when you're influencing, you're leading, if you have really good outcomes, what happens? Trust happens. And trust is really important, because we humans are not wired to exist as one entity. We always work and live in groups. And trust is a glue, it's a social glue of humans. Once you have trust in your team, in your company, or just between two people, it's much easier to collaborate, it's much easier to lead, it's much easier to influence, and it's a positive feedback loop. The question is, if you come to a new environment, how can you start collaborating? It's a chicken and egg problem. If nobody trusts anyone, how can cooperation and collaboration even emerge? There was an excellent paper in the 80s by a political scientist called Robert Axelrod, and he talked about emergence of cooperation. It can emerge under certain variables and in certain conditions on its own, because it's the most productive behavior. And I can recommend the paper. Also, this is a book. Or if you're more into web games, there's a really good web game you can try. It takes about half an hour. It covers the same topic. It's interactive. But you will learn a lot about collaborating with other people and what is the best approach. And then project management skills. These are really important. As long as you will work with other people, you will need to manage deadlines, estimates, risks. It doesn't mean you have to be a professional project manager to use those skills. In the same way, you don't have to be a professional writer to improve your writing. But you need to be able to do this. And we are coming to the last one, critical thinking. And I think this is the one that I struggle with the most. Just first to define it, but then also how to improve it. We all want to be better critical thinkers. But what does it really mean? So let's look at the definition. There are many definitions, so let's just decide on one. It's a process for evaluating information to form a judgment or to make the best decision under the circumstances. So you want to form a judgment or you want to make the best decision. And critical thinking was always important, but I think it's especially important today. There's so many information and misinformation running around on the internet, and it's really hard to discern what is true, what is false. So how do you do this? In my mind, there are 3 steps. The first one is just recognizing when your thinking fails. And for this, it's really important to know your brain and your biology. It's really important to know why our brain is a pattern matching machine. Why do we try to fill in the gaps? Why are we willing to fill in the gaps with trash and misinformation? How our perception works, how our memory works, and how they both fail. And many of these can be summed under a name called cognitive biases. And if you go to Wikipedia, just as a starting point, you can find a lot of them. I think there are 200 of them listed there. It doesn't mean you have to understand all of them and you have to learn them to be able to think better, but just being aware of them, I think, is helpful. In the same way, maybe if some of you have tried meditation, what you're trying to do is trying to dissociate a bit from your emotion and your thoughts, just to observe it. In the same way, if you know cognitive biases, when you are in a situation that you might be biased, if you notice something is happening, you might say, oh, maybe I'm making a mistake here. Let me just look it up, or maybe rethink it twice. Let's try an example. Linda is 31 years old. She's single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. So Linda is pretty cool. The question for us today is, which is more probable? That Linda is a banker, or Linda is a banker and is active in the feminist movement? If you're like most people, you would say number 2. Of course, it's a better description of Linda. We just read the description before. But you would make a mistake, because the question is, which is more probable? These are all bankers. And here are all people who are active in the feminist movement. And you can see that people who are both bankers and active, just a small overlap. So by definition, it has to be that being a bank teller is always more probable. And this happens because humans, when they hear a very vivid story, their emotions rise up and they try to find all those connections. So now you know why in news, when you have a particular story about a particular person, it's very easy to feel emotional or to paint a certain picture of a category. So you have to think about this. It's just a human bias. It happens to all of us. All of us have this initial jump that we want to say number 2 is correct. The second thing that is really important, oh, by the way, thinking fast and slow, Daniel Kahneman got a Nobel Prize for this, and he and Amos Tversky actually made up these examples in the 70s, and they redefined the whole field of behavioral economics and psychology. So, highly recommend it. The second thing is just logical reasoning. And some of you had this in school, Some of you maybe you haven't, but people have been doing it for thousands of years. Like Greeks started it, or have been one of the first people who have done it. It's just inference, deduction, induction, evaluating arguments, making arguments, connecting arguments to logical conclusions. There are a lot of online resources or books or schools that teach this. But it's a critical part of critical thinking, of course. And then there's still something missing. There's this part that I just couldn't grasp, or I think I knew but just couldn't verbalize. And then I found a name, and it's called mental models. And mental models are representations of how something works in the world. There's so many things in the world, you cannot know all the details of everything. But can you just understand a tiny bit of it? Is there a model, a good representation of a thing? If you know a lot of things like this, you will be able to reason about a lot of things, of course. And a really good resource for this is Farnham Street. It has a list of more than 100 mental models. And this is not exhaustive, but it covers all the broad categories. And they fall into buckets like numeracy, microeconomics, human nature, biology. It's just how things work. A lot of things about numeracy is just recognizing that we humans are really good at numbers, especially in statistics. And what are some of the basic concepts we can learn there? Or also about human nature and judgment. Why do we always make us and them distinctions? Why is this happening? Can we stop this? Or is it this ingrained? If it's ingrained, can we work around it? And this will take probably a lifetime, but you can start now to understand all of this. And two good examples are thinking in systems, and then the second one is just behavior, by a really famous neuroscientist who talks about biology behind human behavior. So going back to the division of skills, the question from the beginning was, how do we prepare for the unknown future? I think the answer lies in understanding where all the skills you can learn lie on this spectrum of change. And you can look at it like trees. You have a trunk, you have branches, you have leaves on the right. Some things, like foundational skills, are so closely tied to how we as humans work, to our biology and our psychology, that those skills will change only when we humans as a species change. On the other hand, you have this other extreme, is very situational. It just happens where you are in the moment. And this can change anytime. It's like leaves, like leaves on a branch. Every season it changes. If there's a strong wind, it will change, while the foundation is very strong. And yes, it's really hard to invest time into foundational skills. It takes time and it's hard. But most of the things you accomplished in your life that you're proud of were hard and took time. And they're not as, you don't get as instant gratification as from the work-related skills. If you want to say, oh, I want to learn something about virtual reality, you can go in, you can play with a specific device, learn the specific thing. But the question is, will this thing last for a couple of months, for a couple of years, or for 3 decades? And it's really hard to decide. So what I would say is, yes, you will need skills to do your job from the whole range, but try to spend as much time as possible in the middle on the foundational skills of your domain and also the foundational skills of you as a human. And then as you think what's next for you, think if you want to nurture your tree of knowledge or if you just want to end up with a pile of dry leaves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there maybe, we have maybe a minute or two for a quick question, if someone has it. Oh, sorry for that. Okay. Is there a question for Merlin? You can, of course, talk to him. You'll be here all day, of course.
Yes, find me.
And he has
around.
an email, so you can always, it's new. If you didn't hear about email, it's new, it's fun, you should try it, you know. No questions? Okay, maybe people are shy, maybe waking up. Thank you for the talk. Thank you, Marilyn. You're free to go.